And we are recording as part of Hearthstone University. I have to say that with a mildly British accent. For people who watch it in the future, um, for channel 370, and for the people who are unfortunately having to miss it today. Welcome to COVID in Context. We're going to be using pencil, paper to kind of work through some issues and feelings we've had about the last 15, 18 years, months, that we've been going through this. I'm going to be quiet in a moment, but real quick, David McIntosh of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a school educator and youth engagement communication officer. He's a trained teacher for middle and high school students for 30 years in the Puget Sound region. And he's a Chicago native. Oh, Chicago. That's where I moved here from. And Pacific Northwest enthusiast. Okay, we have to talk offline after this. But speaking of talking, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let David take over. And I'm going to say thank you very much. And please take it away, sir.
Okay, thank you, Alan Jacobson. I appreciate you immensely. It was fun talking with you. And welcome, everyone. I am really excited that you're here for this particular presentation. But I have to say, it's not just a presentation. It's where we all get an opportunity to engage. So to hear your voice will make this particular workshop worthwhile. And that's what we're going to try to do, hear your voice as well. So if you give me just a moment, I'll share my screen. And I'll share my sound as well. Okay. So welcome everyone to our COVID-19 in Context presentation this morning. How is everyone doing? Is it nice and cool where you are?
No, it's
No.
quite warm. we have the air conditioner on, as you can see way in the back there.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the residents have air conditioners, luckily, in their own apartments, but here in the common area, it's not as comfortable. But we would love to hear your presentation, and then we'll probably go back to the apartment.
Oh. Well, okay, we won't be long, but I'm so glad we're able to build community in this short time for this particular workshop, and I won't belabor the point. But we're going to talk a little bit about what we've all been talking about for, like Alan said, about the last 15 months. And that is COVID-19. But we're going to look at it in a different way today, a bit of a COVID-19 in context. First, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. My name is David, and my last name is just of interest because it really is a interesting last name, is McIntosh. Like, it's not spelled like the computer, it's spelled mostly like the apple, McIntosh. And my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am, again, glad to be here. So I'm here as part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Discovery Center. And the Gates Foundation focus is the world is a place where everyone can have a chance to live a healthy and productive life. So our work, funding and partnering is all around this idea that everyone has a right to live a happy and productive life. So when you think about COVID-19, the pandemic, what are two words that come to mind? Now, I know we don't have our individual computers today, and so we're not going to be using the chat, but I do welcome you just to kind of speak out where you are and tell us a little bit about what two words come to mind when you think of COVID-19.
Ladies, would anybody like to answer? Illness. What did you say? Illness. Illness.
Yes.
Separation.
Yes. That's good. Those are great words, and those are words we've all experienced. And today, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about those particular words. But before we do, what I'd like to also do is talk about our land acknowledgement. And here we're going to take just a moment to acknowledge and honor that the Discovery Center sits on traditional homelands of the Coast Salish tribe, where we hold gratitude for indigenous people who have lived and worked here for more than 10,000 years. Now, I'm calling specifically from a different place, particularly, and that is the South Seattle area. And now I've just remembered that I'm remiss that I didn't introduce my colleague, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. And ladies, I have to tell you, the reason I remembered is because we're neighbors. So my colleague lives about a block away from me, and we both live on ceded lands of the Duwamish and Coast Salish people. And that's where we're calling from now. We're not calling from the same place, different homes, but same area. So I'm going to let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Linda. I use she, her pronouns. Yes, like David said, I do just live a block away from him. And I am so happy to be here with you all. I'll just be kind of monitoring things on the tech side, making sure nothing goes wrong for David. And I'll try and participate too. I do really love this program. It's a great way for all of us to connect and reflect on what we've gone through personally during the pandemic. Yeah, and a little bit more about, some of my context is I have worked in education for about 6 or 7 years now in museums and other nonprofit organizations. So that's just a little bit about me and who I am and what I'll be doing today.
Thank you so much, Linda and David.
You are welcome. And ladies, I have to tell you that if you have any hard questions for me, Linda will be answering them for you. So again, we're calling as staff of the Discovery Center, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Discovery Center, and we're so glad again to be here. But what is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation doing to support pandemic research and recovery? That's the question that we'd like to ask. And so some of you have some ideas, but we're going to look at some of these particular pictures. And the picture on the farthest left, and we're going to look at that picture, and then we're going to go to the rest of them from top to bottom. But that particular picture is a healthcare worker testing people for COVID-19 in Nashville, Tennessee. And some of our experiences have been with COVID for the first time is the first step was testing. The second picture that we're going to look at is our foundation partnered with historical Black colleges and universities to expand diagnostic testing capacity on their campuses. So that particular campus was important to us because that's where in Nashville, Tennessee, that's where we did partnership in helping to get expanded diagnostic testing capacity on the campus. And we'll talk a little bit more why we targeted that particular demographic, because it's very important when we talk about COVID-19. Picture number 2. So the next picture to our right, you see the person with the gloves and the swab. This is a lab technician inserting a swab into a COVID-19 rapid test machine. And why that's significant to us, because it started governments needing to continue investigating scientific tools that are getting us through this current pandemic, even after COVID-19 is behind us. So that particular picture is significant because of the medical technology that we have gained because of COVID-19. And we just wanted to note that. The next picture, number 3, and we see the workers assembling COVID-19 testing kits at a diagnostic imaging unit in Ghana, Africa. working to spot diseases outbreaks as soon as they happen. So remember, we heard last week and weeks prior, the variants. So this particular group and others around the world created diagnostic labs so that they could look at the disease and the outbreaks and the variances as soon as they happen, building a global alert system and teams of infection disease first responders. So we could get to it right away and start to test to find out if the vaccines will work against the different variants and where exactly were the outbreaks, and a little bit of information and investigative work around how to meet the needs where the outbreaks were happening. So a question, has everyone in the room had their vaccination shots? Yep,
Answer,
I see.
yes,
Yep,
yes.
I see heads nodding,
And staff included as well.
and staff included, which is very
Yes.
important. Yeah, yep, because we're going back as a foundation in September 13th, and that's one of the um, requests that they have for all staff members is that they all are vaccinated. And the reason is so that when we're doing the work, because we are not done with the virus itself. We are in post-COVID, meaning the big surge has happened around the world, and so now we're still dealing with the virus itself and some variants, but it is not as what I want to say alarming as it was before. And that team that you see in that picture, that's their focus, is to find out where things are outbreaking and how to get to it. So our final picture, number 4, is the business correspondent agent helps a woman with a bank transaction in India. And this is creating digital cash transfer programs with women in needs in mind. And so the Gates Foundation does everything from working with COVID infectious disease sites where we're looking where the variants are happening and where the outbreaks are happening, to actually helping women in with economic needs all over the world. And this particular one is in Salena, India. And so we just want to talk a little bit about what the foundation is doing to support the pandemic and the research efforts around the world, because we know that there are a lot of issues around economics and COVID-19. And so that's why we wanted to put that picture there as well, because those particular pieces around cash transfer and digital cash transfer is something the foundation is very interested in, especially when it comes to women equality and the workforce around the world. And so that's why we wanted to include that, because it's a part of the pandemic. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to look at some teen art for just a moment. So can you all see this from your screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So this is a teen artist, and it was posted in the Seattle Art Museum. And it has a reflection and some ideas around their thoughts of COVID and how their world has changed. And those shapes and pictures that you see, they're quite interesting. So does anyone see anything that just strikes their attention right away?
What do you notice? I noticed the font and rearranging is definitely dancing and moving.
That's exactly what I noticed. That's exactly what I noticed. But I also noticed how it was seeming to just kind of fade away, and almost like just it's kind of, it's almost eerie the way it looks, the way the print looks to me, and the coloring. But I also noticed the hearts up on top as well, and the kind of the rainbow. I'll put my little pointer on here. This little bit of a rainbow of yellow, and that's that hope around the hearts.
Yes.
So So when we think about COVID-19, we think about our own personal response. And your two words that I heard were illnesses and some, it wasn't actually said, but I think it was more like um, loneliness
Yeah.
because it's separation from family, and that was experienced in the community. Um, so I want to just talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So here's our plan. We did a little introduction, and we're going to talk a little bit about how can we support each other and define the word context. We're going to think critically about art in the context of COVID-19 and reflect on artists' responses to the pandemic. So it's going to be almost like choose your own adventure because we have three types of artists that artistry that we're going to look at. One is going to be school and education. One will be women's art, and the other will be community art. And so we can choose either one of those to look at today, and then kind of have a discussion around it and synthesize how we have experienced COVID-19 and the particular art that we're looking at. Okay?
Great. Thank you. Ladies,
You're
do you have
welcome.
you have a
So
question?
what do we need? Not very much at all. And you don't really have to have a pen or pencil, but it would be nice to kind of create a bit of a journal of this particular workshop for yourself so that you can reflect back on in the future. So a pen, a pencil, and a marker or a crayon, and then something to write on. It could be a sheet of paper, a notebook, um, whatever you would like to kind of log in some of your thoughts.
Yes, and
We're gonna,
I just, sorry to interrupt. I just
no, you're fine.
two pads of paper and pens. Excuse me, 1 second. I have to talk to someone. I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. So we're going to dabble just a little bit in what I like to think of as art therapy. So kind of talk about
Sit
how
down.
we,
Come and sit down.
so some people have the pads and we're going to wait for the other person to get the pad. And yes, we're going to talk a little bit about a little art therapy and synthesizing our thoughts, putting our thoughts and our ideas together. But as we do, I want to talk about a way that we are going to kind of navigate through our new community. So what I'd like for us to do is just speak our truth. I want us to listen to understand. So there may be others that have a different idea about what we're discussing. So I'd like for us just to kind of listen and understand. That would be really nice to do. And then we respond. Remain present and engaged. So sometimes when we're talking about a subject matter, and we may be very engaged, and sometimes it's a little hard to stay engaged. So I just really like for us just to remain present and engaged, to be mindful of intent versus impact. And so what that means is we intend to do something and it has a different impact. And so I just like for us to be mindful of that. And then I also like for us to just to think critically. So some things we're going to see, I'd like for us to think about it critically. Now, is there anything else that I missed in this time together that you would like for us to consider?
I think you covered it all. Is there anything else, ladies?
We don't know enough about what he's going to do.
I think we just want you to start because, and it will interrupt you if we think of anything else, if you don't mind.
Okay,
There we go.
I like that. That sounds perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to mention this quick. We're going to mention this real quickly. The word vulnerability and consent. So we really, if you need to step away or if you need to just kind of pull back from the conversation, please feel at liberty to do so. We feel that it is okay to do so. I'd like to read something to you that a poet, Adriana Marie Brown, wrote. She says, "I am living a life I don't regret, a life that will resonate with
Living
my
a life-
ancestors.
Sorry, I apologize. I had to repeat it because our air conditioning is loud.
Oh, it's so loud. Okay, well, this poem I was going to read. You know what? I'm going to hold back from that poem because you don't have to read that. It basically says that we are glad to be in community and we really want to be our authentic selves as we communicate. So we're going to move on to talk about this word content, and this is where I'm going to need your help. So, what is content?
Content or context?
I'm sorry, context. Sorry. What is
that's okay.
context?
Context is what? We're asking of what? Context of what?
What are you going to talk about?
Yes. So context, just in general, the word itself. So let me give you a definition really quickly. The circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or an idea. We're talking about context. Context. The circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and accessed. That's our definition that we're working with. Because when we talk about COVID-19 in context, we're going to talk about this word context. And I would like to have some of your ideas of what context is. So basically, I want to talk about the art that we're going to look at and COVID-19 in context of that art. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about why we reflect and respond to art. Why is it do people reflect and respond to art?
Well, we do have Inge right here in the front, who is an artist, a painter. So do you mind if I put you on the spot? Why do we respond to art?
Now, during this time, I have not responded to art at all.
Oh, okay. Did you hear? Inge said during this time of COVID, she has not been responding to art at all. Because
Yes.
you haven't been going to museums and you haven't seen much.
I haven't felt like doing anything about it. I have a fantasy, and whenever it comes out of my fantasy, I just draw with colors. And I see afterwards what it looks like. So it's an experience for me, what I paint. I don't paint for any purpose.
Wonderful. Were you able to hear all of what Inge said?
Yes, I sure was. Ingrid, thank you so very much. I so appreciate your comments, and I hear you. Because of COVID-19 and the way that our world has changed, it's like that teenager's art that we looked at earlier. It kind of reflected this whole rearranging idea, and our whole world has been rearranged. And so I understand how and why it's been very difficult to reflect and respond to art. So I want to talk a little bit about the different art that we're going to look at, and we have a choice. And so ladies, I'd like for you to tell me, what kind of art would we like to look at? And there's some questions around the art, because like Ingrid said, we just haven't felt like it because of the environment that we've been thrusted in with this pandemic. So what I'd like for us to do is take just a few moments for the rest of the workshop and look at some different art. So would we like the school and students art, or would we like the community and connections, or the women's art?
They're
What-
deciding.
Okay.
I'll take a shot.
Community and connection.
We have a vote for community and connections, and the other two say yes.
To it,
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay,
I like the connections.
community and connections wins our vote.
All right, well, let's go to community and connections. So how have our communities interacted, connected, and reflected since the start of COVID-19 pandemic? What has worked well for you? How have you stayed connected? So that's the question. And Ingrid, you answered that really, really well. It has been very difficult to stay connected to art and to make those reflections. And so that's one of the questions, and thank you for answering that. So the piece of art that I want you to see and also hear is a little bit of a video. Now, ladies, we're gonna go with these teenagers and listen to their song. And then I want us to respond to this particular video. So are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Oh, sorry. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. Okay, here we go.
I just wanna go outside. Staying inside got me losing my mind. I just wanna go outside. Staying inside got me losing my mind. Let's go. I just wanna go outside. Staying inside, I've lost my mind. Thinking about all those good times. Remember those good old days before we stood 6 feet away. Now they are just memories to replay.
At the end of the day, no matter what happens, I just want you guys to remember. We'll all be okay.
Okay, so let me give you a little bit of history behind that particular video. So that was done from students in Juneau, Alaska. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so these kiddos, Thomas Kaufman, Lance Algabry, and Andrew Garcia, created this particular song and this video, and it was inspired by the brutal couple of months. It's kind of like what Ingrid was saying. It's just this time that we have spent together at COVID-19 that it's just difficult. And so these young men felt that it was just a brutal time for them to be indoors, and it happened after a COVID-19 spike in Juneau, Alaska. And so they created this song and to help them out of anxiety and depression, and just to kind of spread a little positivity to say it's going to be okay. So what I'd like for you to do is, on your pad of paper, from the art that you've seen from those young men, tell me some things that struck out to you in your first column. So you can just do response one. And in that first column from that particular video, go ahead and write down some things you've seen. Like for me, what I wrote down was, I noticed one young man jumping erratically in his room. And I noticed that he was letting some energy out, because if he's been indoors for that long, he's going to probably have a lot of energy. So that's what I noticed. What did you notice? So I'll give you a moment and go ahead and write on your sheet of paper some things you remembered. Do we need to see the video again?
No, I don't think so. Thank you,
Okay.
Maybe,
No.
do you want to just talk about it openly?
Yes, we can also talk about it openly too.
What did you, does anyone want to share what they felt watching the video?
I was just listening.
Carla says, I was just listening to music.
Good. That is perfect. That is perfect. You could just write down, it was musical. It was music and very musical.
Inga has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Ingrid.
I was fascinated with the pictures of the people. My son is a musician. He writes music, plays the guitar, He has been doing that since he's 12 years and he's in his 40s. And he's still doing it, not making any money. He's writing music. He's very bright, and thoughtful, spiritual, and he might have made it in the music world, but he's not that kind of person. Very thoughtful, very spiritual. So in some way I can relate to the books, but I don't know the person itself very well. We see each other very, very rarely, but I'm beginning to know him better now that I'm 90.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for
That's
sharing.
yes. Thank you, Ingrid. I love that. And that's what we're doing today. COVID in context. How does it relate to our lives? And how are we managing some of those words that we talked about a little bit earlier? Those words around illness, those words around being, separated from the ones we love. And how does that work? And Ingrid, I love that because music does create this opportunity to see someone's expression and to get to know them better. So these young men, Thomas, Lance, and Andrew, I like their expression of COVID-19. So let's go to the next piece. And here are a few pictures that were posted around the pandemic. And one was in the Seattle Chinatown area. And I'll give you just a moment because I know you can see these. And Moni Chow created this one. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of them, but I just want to go through each one of them just for a moment. And the middle one was done by a group called Amplifier. And it is called Pandemic as Portal. The time is now. Imagine another world and fight for it. So we'll talk about that piece. And then Amplifier created another one, Save the Post Office. And so those, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, thankfully it is saved.
Yes,
The
I know. Snail
poster
mail.
worked.
Yes, it took a lot of work, but we
Yeah.
did it. Yes.
Understand that context,
The post office?
what you said.
Oh, I said thankfully the poster worked because the post office is saved.
And yeah, and I love the way you brought that out. The posters work. So let's talk about this particular type of art.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I just didn't get it.
Thank you, David. We understand now.
Yes. So let's talk about this particular type of art. We've seen the young men expressing themselves through music and COVID-19, and we've seen the context of how that relationship happens with how we manage COVID-19. What about these particular, and I'm not going to talk as much. I want to hear from everyone in the room, and because Ingrid, thank you so much. Your participation has been phenomenal, and I appreciate that. But I want to talk a little bit about these particular posters. Let's start with the one on the far left with the Chinatown, Filipino, Japanese, Little Saigon, and then the resilience. Tell me what you think of when you see that particular sign.
I can't figure out what it is. Okay, so Carla in the very back is saying she can't figure out what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
She's probably
It's like an eel.
a heel.
Yeah.
Ah,
It looks like an eel. And I'm almost sure, now here's where a hard question for Linda is coming. So, so Linda, I think it's a lotus flower.
Yeah, I think I remember something about a lotus flower, about
Yeah.
that particular piece.
And here's why, because the lotus itself, that particular plant, that flower, grows in a very murky, muddy space, and it's really hard for it to grow, but it does. And then when it finally does persevere through that muddy, murky space that it's in to grow and develop, it's one of the most beautiful flowers in Southeast Asia. And so their symbol is, although things are hard and difficult, once they come through, it's beautiful. But what do you notice? Is it just one people group on Southeast Asia, or not Southeast Asia only, but is it just one people group of an Asian influence?
No, it's several.
It's several. So it's a conglomerate. It's a connection of all people groups in that particular demographic. And they're saying together, we came through. And that word at the bottom, can anyone tell me what that big word in the middle? I shouldn't say at the bottom, it's in the middle. The big word in the middle. Why do you think they put that word there?
Yeah, definitely resilience.
Yeah. And the definition of that word, and here's what I want you to do. Create a column number 2 on your pad, and make response 2. So response 1 was the young men and their video. And someone said it was very musical. Someone said it helped me connect with my son. This one, this particular resilience, I want you to comment on that word. And how has your life during COVID-19 reflected resilience?
That's a great question.
Some of you may say, wow, I really had to be strong while I couldn't get my family to come visit for a time. Some of you may say, whew, it's just a lot of things, the whole world being rearranged. I had to weather through that particular storm. So how has it been for you? Number 2. And we can talk too. If you don't want to write, you can talk it out as well.
Oh, well, I could quickly share. I'm a mother of a 8-year-old. Well, at the time during the high peak of COVID, March of 2020, suddenly I became a elementary school teacher. I became her 2nd grade teacher.
Wow.
So that I was on the mission to actually get a full-time job right when COVID hit. And suddenly my plans got changed and I became a teacher instead. And I don't regret it. I was there for my daughter when she needed me. So.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. See, that is resilience.
Yeah. And I have so much respect for the teaching world because I realize how much work they do each and every moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I've heard a lot of parents say that. Oh my goodness, I'm bringing my teachers a present. Parents are, I'm getting them a present as soon as school opens back up. So
absolutely.
That is so good.
So that's my little story, but I will let the ladies speak because they were, of course, here at the Hearthstone throughout the whole pandemic. And
yeah,
the ladies like to share how resilience. Okay, Inga, it's actually Inga, by the way, INGE.
Okay, Inga. Yes,
Inga.
Inga.
Go last, but with Helen and Carla, would you like to share the word resilience and how that has impacted you, how COVID has given you resilience? Helen? No comment. Okay, Carla's gonna have no comment. Helen, you don't have to if you don't want to.
I don't know what in order to be honest in your reaction, it has to come effortlessly. The minute you start planning, well, let's see, I got to respond, forget it. It just has to come.
Right. Okay, so when you're ready, you just chime in whenever you want. I'll stop putting you on the spot. Sorry, Helen. Thank you for being honest.
At this time in my life, I find I've been resilient so far. I find it very difficult right now. not only the loneliness, but my inability to handle it very well. Now that I'm more, let's say, mature or more aware of all the good things that have happened to me. But this is miserable because I cannot be involved. I miss the church, I miss the music, I miss my children, my family. So it's pretty miserable. I have my plans, my friends here. It's very difficult to make friends for me. I've been all over the world and I've adapted to most situations, but this is very difficult. It goes very, very deep. Yeah. You know, seeing the change that I feel our whole population all over the world, the changes we have to make and how many offerings we have to make to get through. And there's always that concern for others. So it's kind of a helpless feeling. I haven't been able to get past that. It's a long story.
But we appreciate you opening up about it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. That level of vulnerability, I so appreciate it. And yes, it is. I understand it's a long story, but it's one we all share at certain capacities and different intersections. That story is, many of us can tell parts of that. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. I want to go to the next. We have just a few minutes, but I want to go to the next few pictures, and I want to talk about the pandemic as a portal. And the first one I thought was very interesting, and it would be so nice for us to go through. So I took a little time, but here's where I want you to do your own reflections. Pandemic as a portal, allowing the pandemic to not be a stumbling block, but a stepping stone. How can we learn from the pandemic? And remember the picture we seen of the group that was in the medical community and they had the swab and they were putting it in the different machines. And we talked about different medical technology being advanced because of the pandemic and that it's going to be around after the pandemic to serve people well. Well, where has that happened in our lives? What have we learned from the pandemic? What are some things that we can say, wow, that was a positive thing that I learned from the pandemic, and I'm going to take it with me. So go ahead and write that down.
Carla said how angry people can get.
Yes, yes, we learned. Yes, Carla, I hear you. that has been my experience as well. The level of stress. And Carla, I think that comes from fear. I think when people are not sure what's going on and what's going to happen, there's a certain level of fear. And so, yeah. And the beauty of art is that it pulls those thoughts, emotions out and allow us to discuss and talk about it. And then we can navigate our way through it. Because when people are angry, it's kind of tough to be around.
Yes.
It's tough. But we can navigate. We navigate because we're able to have these community discussions. And that's what we mean about the context of COVID. What context are we looking at? And so this is creating those opportunities. Pandemic as a porthole. There's a better world. This is the time to fight for it now. Makes us all resilient. I like that. And okay, let's look at the last one, which is the post office worker. Save the post office. That to me, and I don't know for you guys, but that particular poster makes me think a lot about activism. So I want you to write what kind of active energy did you put out during the COVID-19 pandemic? Like Carla said, sometimes people are really angry. So for me, when I have encountered angry people, I become a good listener because I want to hear so that you can know that I care. So that was my activity. What are some things you did during COVID?
David,
What?
I see your halo on you.
Well, there's not a whole lot you can do when people are angry.
David, I just want to let you know that in 5 minutes, unfortunately, the ladies do need to go down to lunch in 5 minutes.
Okay, okay.
So,
We're gonna move along, and we've had this wonderful opportunity to look at that particular. We won't look at the women's art. What we'll do is we'll keep going. And I'm going to slip through a few slides because I want to stop with the take action and to use your power. I talked about listening. We give support to people. And I love, and I want to say the name right, Ingrid.
she goes by Inge,
Inge.
INGE, German
Inga.
name.
Okay, Inga.
Yeah.
There we are. I love that name, Inga. Thank you for putting up with me pronouncing it incorrectly. But like she talked about her son. Inga talked about her son and getting to know him better. I love that. And that is the people power we're talking about, and giving support, asking for support. That's very important. Like Inga said, it's just very difficult, and for a lot of us, it has been. And so, how do we ask for support? Continue reflecting and asking. So, having these community conversations, being able to look at art and discuss some of the emotions that come through them is very important as well. And connect with a friend. Like Inga said, hey, you know what? It's hard to make friends sometimes, especially in this COVID environment. But we get an opportunity to do that. So at lunch, when you guys are at lunch and you're taking some time to nourish your bodies, take some time to nourish your soul and make a new friend. And so, yeah, and have those conversations. And lastly, I want to talk about some different opportunities that are out there and resources, and we'll make sure that Mr. Jacobson gets them, and also the other folks that are working with you, so that if there is any need for some of these resources, you can tap into. Um, there are tons of resources for different people, different groups of people. One is the NAM helpline. There is a national suicide prevention helpline. Not to say that anyone needs it right now, but if you know someone who possibly does, those are resources. And I just wanted to bring that up because I wanted to make sure that, and I'll stop sharing, I wanted to make sure that you all had a kind of a toolkit to walk through COVID-19. It's 11:58. I wanted to give us some time, you all some time to respond on our little workshop and conversation around art and the context, in the context of COVID. So anyone has any last parting thoughts? We have about 1 minute left.
Say thank you for the program that is offered here. I'm very thoughtful from the beginning towards where we are right now. A guide helps us through the various stages that we all can relate to. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Inga. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Linda, for being here and providing this context that we can talk to each other and have a moment of reflection rather than just going about our daily lives without sometimes thinking about how it really impacts us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David. And thank you from the viewers of the future, because this will be on our in-house cable channel. And Inga, Carla, Beatrice, thanks for gathering the crowd. And David, thanks for an excellent presentation. I was only able to be in and out of the room, so I will be one of the viewers of the crowd in the future. So any final thoughts before we hit a stop to the recording?
We appreciate you and thank you so very much.
You are welcome. You are welcome. We appreciate the opportunity to be with Hearthstone, and we also are so thankful that everyone participated. And listen, we want you to do well and be well.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All the best.
Okay.